of the CGI podcast. Today, we have jacobc.eth, the lead of operations for MetaMask. As we all know, one of the tippy top pieces of technology in the whole crypto world. Jacob, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Ben. Appreciate you having me.
So you're the man. I can't wait to dig in. Just kind of want to set the stage here. I want to talk about a little bit about your story and how you really got to where you are, how you got into crypto, how you got into your current position, and then I want to talk about everything Metaverse. So where you see it going, and what's happening in the world here. So I'll zip it, and I'd love to hear your story.
Sure. Well, I grew up as I'd say an internet radical. I was an early BitTorrent person, and the internet was really exciting to me because it was the promise of a greatly democratized society with freer sharing of information, and it was going to empower millions of people and billions of people in ways that they had been locked out of society. And instead, we got like 5 tech monopolies that run our lives. And I think I had experimented a little bit with Bitcoin in the early days of Bitcoin. And when I had first read about Ethereum, it was sort of like my head exploded, and it was like the opportunity to build all these decentralized applications and to build this internet that was going to be much more community powered and much more where people would own their own funds and identities and data and all those sort of things. And for me, MetaMask was sort of the most important piece of it, because it was how people were going to enter the decentralized web, and it was how the decentralized web would become more accessible to millions and then eventually billions of people. And so, I joined Consensus about 3 years ago. I very first worked on an open source funding DAO that did grants for open source projects. And then I joined MetaMask about 2 years ago, and have been working to make the decentralized web democratized, to make it available to everyone, to ultimately make the internet and the whole financial system something that serves people and allows people to form communities and to freely associate with each other, not something that's to enrich a small number of gatekeepers.
So I love this idea, and I absolutely agree with you that technology like MetaMask is going to be the gateway to freedom for people. And I mean that's what I think it is true freedom and decentralization. So when it comes to you getting into the space, though, I mean, MetaMask is a totally badass organization with a lot of people, and you have millions and millions of customers. I mean, to be the lead of operations for that ecosystem, that's awesome. Like, how did you build that skill set? And like, what's your superpower? Like, how did you actually get to be this person today?
So MetaMask is not a giant organization. Just for some context, so when I joined, I think MetaMask was like 17 people, and we were supporting about, at the time, I think we had like 200,000 monthly active users. And like in 2020, like in the sort of the darkest days of COVID, it was really scary times. Like, there was a lot of challenges around people generally thought that wallets didn't have a sustainable business model. Just despite misconceptions, I think many people who've joined the ecosystem think that like gas fees go to wallets or something. That's definitely not true. We don't get anything from that, and we're not these like gas fee fat cats. But but we've been able to scale up the team. We're scaling up our support team as fast as we can, and it's like really important that we build that out. There's about 25 people working on support and about 40 people plus or minus working on the core wallet. So let's see. I first joined. I worked in traditional Web 2 tech startups before this, and I had done some work in the real estate industry and built real estate transaction tech. And it wasn't really my passion, but it was a career and a job. But around the same time, I had been reading about Ethereum, and I just kind of got sucked down the rabbit hole. And I was really excited to kind of use the skills that I had learned from building startups to apply them to Web3. And I'm really influenced by like the lean startup methodology. So it's like build the smallest thing that you can, get validated feedback from customers, and then build in this iterative loop together with your end users. And for MetaMask, that's really interesting because like we have two different customer types. It's both developers, and then it's this entire diverse set of use cases, from gaming to art to DeFi, to people who are surviving in crisis economic situations, making international payments. Like there's so much diversity, like of the different types of people that use MetaMask, and it's been really fun, frankly, to learn about the different use cases that people are exploring and that they're building, and to work together with the community. And it's like, honestly, it's the most fulfilling work I could ever have in my life. So
I love that. One of the things that I kind of see is like this is just what is a function of people in this space, are that everybody's really humble, and I totally love that. But I also want to know, like, like I want to hear you brag on yourself a little bit. Like, what are the
no, I don't do
things
that.
that?
I can't do that.
Okay. So let's move into more of then the metaverse, and let's talk about the market, the trends that we see, because yes, you may not have the largest team, but you have a sizable team, and you're serving, again, millions and millions of people, so you have an insight into the market that is just unparalleled by many people. So what are you seeing as far as like just kind of the state of the market, where we are, and then as specifically to the metaverse, like where are we headed, and what are you seeing from your unique vantage point?
Yeah, I appreciate you using the term metaverse, and I'll say like I just, on that term in particular, I think what's so important about it, before it was stolen by Facebook, is that it didn't mean just a specific use case. It meant the interoperability of the whole decentralized web, where people were building things that cross-pollinate, and that different projects could collaborate in new ways, and different communities could develop relationships with each other in ways that were never possible, where an NFT from one game could be implemented by a different competing game developer. And where, one of my favorite examples is the Neon District team, the Blockade Games. They implemented a particular vehicle in their RPG, and then saw a similar a racing game completely unrelated to their project or their company implement the same NFT inside of their game. And to me, like we've seen since the time when they very first did that, we've seen so many like art persisting across different game ecosystems, and we've seen um, assets from one DeFi project able to be locked inside of a game world, or like people creating in game DeFi vending machines. Like it's so interesting and exciting and powerful, because like a lot of the people who are playing blockchain games are people who've historically been locked out of the world financial system and locked out of economic opportunity, and they can do something that feels really familiar. Like they can play games and do things that are super common, but also gain ownership over the platforms where they're playing these games, and increasingly govern them, and from there discover the world of DeFi and the world of like all those kinds of things. And it totally changes the economics of the world, and I think that's extremely important and exciting.
I think so too. I actually love the fact that almost the people who need it most are the ones that are able to benefit the most. Like I'm sure we're all familiar. Well, I say we're all the people who are very far down the rabbit hole. Like we're familiar with the axes of the world, and a lot of their player bases are people who are able to earn a full time income in this game. And to me, that's like a miracle. Like that is every gamer's dream, is to be able to build a full-time income from just
Yeah.
gaming. Like you don't have to build merch, you don't have to build a brand, you don't have to build like you don't have to do streaming, you don't have to do anything else besides play the game and be the best that you can be playing that game. Like that's a revolution. It's magic.
Yeah, I think that so I'll say like we see a lot of different game projects. I I think that game universes that ever expand, and that also that like that implement utility beyond the game are going to be increasingly important. Like I believe really deeply in interoperability, and so it's not just like we've seen a lot of games get super successful with just like token economics added to a game, and some of those are more ecosystem oriented than others, and things like that. But we've seen a lot of we're seeing stuff like Decentraland put DeFi things inside of the game, or things like what's like some of the game, even on even games like crypto mines and stuff like that, or Cometh. Those are games that have they're both fun, and they're those are both space real time strategy games, but they have DeFi components where based on the things that you do, you're actually carrying out real world financial operations that overlap with the game. And I think that's I like that interoperability. I think it's super important, and I think that's what the future of crypto gaming is going to look like. It's going to increasingly be integrated with other projects and across many use cases, and the lines between these use cases are going to get increasingly blurry, where all kinds of things suddenly make sense in a world where the web is interoperable, and we're not like our identities and data aren't in a bunch of like silos controlled by some third party, where who's mining our data and treating us as the product. Instead, we have our own accounts, our own funds and assets, and we use the decentralized web to share and cross pollinate.
I love that. I'm actually a huge believer in the idea of like everything should almost within the metaverse, everything should be connected in a cool way. And I definitely like the idea of interoperability or interoperability. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. Not sound like an idiot on my own show, but the idea of like to me, a gamer can go from playing a game, earning in-game uh, currency or items, and then when they're tired of that game, they can hop into a different game because they've traded those assets and gotten currency, move to the next game, use that same currency to buy assets in the new game, and they can almost pick up right where they left off, right? So that's
Right.
one use case. Another one would be even deeper down the rabbit hole of like you're in game A, there's like a wormhole in game A. You hop into that and you end up popping out on the other side in game B, and it's just seamless like that. And then like your NFTs are rendered in multiple games, so it's like the NFT is its own character. But I mean, is that the level that we're talking about here that you see as like the inevitable future? Or is there something even deeper that I'm not seeing here that we should be on the lookout, that should be on our radar?
Well, so like I think there's economic incentives for game developers to implement the NFTs that are in other projects within their own project. And those can be represented in totally new ways. So like, you know, I think some pretty simple examples are like Gods Unchained implemented crypto kitties inside of their game. Like, and the cats just like sit on the board as you're playing a card game, and they're basically just a form of swag, but it's a really simple implementation where two very different companies, Dapper and Immutable, are using the same assets, and I'm not sure if they have some. It's not even required that the developers have relationships with each other necessarily. They can purely on their own initiative cross pollinate those NFTs, and I think that it's cool because it creates a common a common user base across the games, and so they start growing this larger decentralized metaverse. Like I don't use metaverse to refer to, Facebook uses it to refer to VR, their own VR walled garden.
It's the collective, of everything.
It means the whole decentralized web that's pollinating across many games and use cases. And, in this instance, like multiple game developers are using the same assets in ways that grow the whole ecosystem. And so their game gains more players and the whole ecosystem gets stronger and gets more interesting and fun and becomes more of a community. And I think that there's also like we're seeing DAOs increasingly invest in one another and have common interests in other communities. So like like one community that's maybe focused on game investments or something, investing in something like SeaWorld DAO, where I don't know, if people don't know what SeaWorld DAO is, it's a super cool project where they're selling NFTs and raising money in this DAO to buy SeaWorld and free all of the orcas. And turn it into like a fun theme park that isn't based on abusing one of the most intelligent species on the planet. So it's like you suddenly have these like totally different communities that have like that are developing common stakes in each other and that are cross collaborating with each other, and they're doing so in much healthier ways. Like we used to hear about communities like on Facebook and stuff, and those are like just like really it's you're being manipulated and you're being shown incendiary content to identify with some some crazy conspiracy theories or something like that. And it's just a much more exciting and healthy and vibrant community ecosystem. And I do think that we will eventually see stuff that rises to the level of kind of what you were alluding to, where people are quickly moving in and out of different games. I think that's quite a bit further away, but I think that like the game itself it's still its own piece of software. Like the client side software is always going to be separate, so it's not like you're moving just totally between games, but the assets themselves are going to flow much more. And we'll probably see also like common communities that span across the games. Like you're using the same Ethereum accounts across the games, or you're using your MetaMask wallet across all the different games. And so that experience becomes much more seamless. It's kind of like what people get from, like a lot of gamers are really partial to having all their games in Steam because they want their achievements and their friends in one place. It's like that on steroids. Like it 10x's that kind of an experience.
And we are all looking for 10x's here. That's one thing we all have in common for sure. So let's talk a little bit about when you're building a project within this ecosystem and you're also a human. And so, I'm sure like the moves of the market have influence on you as an individual. I think that's just nature. That's just biology. How do you kind of separate like, hey, I'm building something for the long term, but also I'm an investor or I'm just a participant and somebody who loves this. Like, how do you kind of separate those two sides of yourself, if at all?
So if I understand your question, like, I think that I personally don't do a lot of like I'm not a degen. I'm not aping into projects, but I do think that maybe the most important way for people to enter the ecosystem is to really use things and to be a part of communities that they find valuable or interesting and things like that. I don't, I like people will say stuff like, what token should I buy? And I absolutely will never answer that question. Like I think that our ecosystem has to, like there's still like a lot of meme coins and stuff that's like it's obviously purely gambling, and I get it. Some people want to gamble. That's their business. But in general, like I think for the long term of our ecosystem, like I try to promote participation as much as I can.
I guess more in like in the spirit of the question is more of like how do you find the time to both be a participant in the market and you're building this whole thing? Like I'm sure when something breaks, like you might be facing a 15, 18-hour day working, in the business, but then like, you're probably still trying to DYOR and like look at new projects and participate in the community. Like there's only so many hours in a day. How do you actually think through that, like from a mental model perspective?
So in the MetaMask team, we're doing these like gaming nights where we're trying particular projects together, and also experiencing things in user experience that are not good and that we need to improve. So we do a bit of that. Let's see. My girlfriend can tell you that I spend too much time on the weekend doing these things because I work all day and then I don't have time to like to actually use things as much as I would like to, and so then I'm doing those on the weekend. I do try to learn about as many projects as I can, and it's super cool being in the MetaMask team because like get exposed to so many different projects and things like that I get to learn about more cool things than I would otherwise. But yeah, it's super cool.
Right on. So from the perspective of actually building a project, like building a crypto project, I personally think that some of the people who experience the greatest, or people who are able to create and capture the most value, are the entrepreneurs who are building in the industry that is blowing up. Like, to me, that's
Yeah,
kind of like, this is the most surefire way to 100x, is to build something and then make it 100x on your own. So as somebody who, I mean, you're working in operations, like, what are the things that people, if they're doing it right, what are they doing internally from an ops standpoint?
well, I'll say one of the things about our ecosystem that does concern me a little bit is like there's a lot of projects that can in bull markets, this is definitely not true in bear markets, but like in bull markets uh, can raise insane amounts of money without product, or much product. Like they just have a token and a contract or something. And through that, the normal feedback loops that are supposed to help a project develop traction and to really like be close to their users and to to really build great products, like there's like some of the incentives are a little off. And I think we as an ecosystem need to realize these cycles and realize some of the crazy stuff that happens in these huge booms. But I think that it's really important to build with your users and with your community. It's really important to do so iteratively, and to you don't have to have this like perfect finished product, but you do need to ship regularly, and you do need to work together with people and listen to people, and also understand that like these products that we're creating are much more international in their usage, and their users are more diverse. They have more diverse backgrounds, whether that's the country that they're from or their economic income. Like it's greatly diverse, and it's super important to listen to people, to develop relationships, to learn from people, and to build communities that also set certain standards as a part of them, like discussions that raise the bar and that really empower people in a participatory way, are much more important than like communities that maybe it's a community but it's just like a chat room of people that are trying to get rich or something.
But from like you're building, you're shipping, you're getting feedback, and then you're building and shipping some more, and then getting more feedback, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
How do you balance this idea of, okay, well, I want to build for my users, however, maybe they don't understand some of the technical side or the technical difficulties? I mean, there has to be some sort of disconnect. Maybe there's not. But is there, I guess a better question, is there some sort of disconnect between what the users want and what is possible from a development standpoint? And then maybe a third pillar of like, well, what's actually best for the project overall?
Yeah, that's a super important distinction. Like, I think it makes sense to build decentralized governance of protocols, but not necessarily like the front ends. And I think that early projects haven't, because we're so early in this ecosystem, it's not always clear what the distinction is. So like we saw this between Uniswap Labs and the Uniswap front end that the Uniswap team makes. versus the Uniswap protocol, which is governed by the Uniswap DAO and is a decentralized set of protocols. So the Uniswap team will make certain changes that they feel are important to the UI, and people are like, why wasn't there a vote on this particular change? Like, you can't put every front end decision up to a token vote. You can use something like snapshot.org to repeatedly get feedback from your stakeholders and your users, because ideally those are the same. Like, you are greatly overlap. Like, you want to distribute tokens to your users as opposed to having tokens held by speculators and users being separate. But I think that like when you frame governance and how you think about it, it's important to make those distinctions. And then like some users are not going to be of the same background as the token holders. They're going to have totally different needs and things like that. And it's important to have a feedback loop with them and to have feedback loops with people of diverse backgrounds and use cases and things like that. Like in the MetaMask world, like, we have people who are using MetaMask in Nigeria, and Nigeria in particular has like pretty difficult bandwidth situations, and like certain features that are super nice for people with stable internet connections destroy the wallet experience for people in low bandwidth situations. And developing the balance for those and navigating those problems is something that we've tried to be super conscious about. And so like we have principles around being an unopinionated and universal wallet. So like allowing people to choose the things that they want, making permissions highly consensual and highly explicit. So it's not enough for something to just be, for the user to be able to opt in or out of something. They have to understand the decision that they're making and to have the context that they need. And also like all of our projects, whether it's MetaMask or game projects, like we have a responsibility to surface things that keep people safe, to help people understand risks involved in using specific types of smart contracts, and to really empower people over time. This world that we're in is really like the early internet, and there were all kinds of risks and scams and things that were associated with the early internet. And increasingly over time, we have to make aspects of the user experience need to be able to be abstracted away, but also what's actually happening and decision-making power needs to remain with the users in the community. Like MetaMask's principles are really built around being the most universal and decentralized wallet. We don't want a future where we become the Web2 gatekeepers of the whole decentralized web. We really disagree with and some wallet projects that are like, we'll just put in this centralized API. It makes the user experience better. And then that centralized API creates like a virtual monopoly over one aspect of the ecosystem. Like, we are going to make things as consensual as possible and as extensible as possible and help empower this entire ecosystem.
Right on. I love that. And yeah, I think I see MetaMask as like a toolkit, and a toolkit to go in and explore with, not a gateway to have to go through. I don't think anybody feels like that. I certainly don't, at least. Now, from the perspective of this, because it seems like there is this balance of governance versus core development. And I know I'm kind of harping on this, but I think it's super important, especially because a lot of our community members are actually building projects of their own. So it's super helpful from that perspective. So you have your team, you're building the UI, you're building the experience, you're building things, but then there are certain parts that definitely need to be um, put up to vote, and for that the community votes on this stuff, from the perspective of, like, let's say, like a DAO with a treasury, right? Maybe how you do that distinction is the front end of what it looks like, how currency enters the ecosystem, and that kind of side is more of UI. The team does that and just ships features and maybe collects feedback on the features, but ultimately the team's building that. But then what happens on the back end with that treasury, and how the capital is allocated, that's put more to a vote, to the DAO. As just an example, how do you actually go about thinking about, okay, where does this particular issue or decision fall in that spectrum? I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I really want to drill down into this because I think this is a huge part of actually building something successfully.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my view is like protocols should be decentralized, and using principles of progressive decentralization, where maybe not everything can be decentralized in the early days, but over time it becomes more decentralized. So like we've seen that with Uniswap, for example, where they started just operating this decentralized exchange and making one important contribution towards decentralization, which was allowing the liquidity to be supplied by the community, which hadn't really existed. There were a few decentralized exchanges that were trying that, but hadn't been able to create user experiences that were accessible enough for people. And then we saw through that adoption and growth that they saw, to really expand to distributing governance tokens to people, having a DAO and treasury, allowing the fee structures to be managed and governed by the community. And I think that now we have multiple front ends, multiple chains, and so I think this is an important use case and story for progressive decentralization. I want to see like game projects do similar things, like where like certain things in the early days don't have to be super decentralized, but they need to over time be targeting that. And like I think some game projects are trying to make like Web 2 ecosystems with token economics, and I don't think that decentralization is necessarily a principle or a major point of focus for all projects. And I do believe that those projects which increasingly iteratively become more decentralized over time are going to find better long-term results. But I'd say, like, in terms of principles for deciding what gets governed when, like, there are certain aspects of like front-end user experience that need a team to be able to make decisions. You can't make everything a vote. So you need some forms of delegation. So like, I think a lot of the teams that we see today will increasingly become DAOs themselves, and those DAOs can hire people and can delegate certain responsibilities to certain people.
Oh, cool.
So there's community governance over the teams, but they're still like employees and they get to make decisions, and it's not like it can't be you can't make people be involved in every decision. You have to have some forms of representation and delegation. But I mean, frankly, like, we'd love to see the MetaMask team go in that direction, and I think that that's our long-term vision for how we'll evolve over time.
I think that is actually going to be a huge game changer, a huge game changer. When you have, it's almost like multiple DAOs within one project's ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool. That's really, really cool. So as we are moving just into the future of crypto and crypto gaming and the metaverse, like I'm super excited. And it's almost kind of hard to contain the excitement because you just kind of want to be like, world, it's coming, it's here. Like we're so close, but we still have a lot of things to do. So like what do you see as kind of the for people who want to get into it and be a part of it and participate, and but we don't want them to get wrecked on spawn, but we want them to be able to participate in the long run, knowing that this is a super long term play. There are going to be road bumps along the way. Like, how do we really stay active and stay and participate? And then eventually, I want everybody to go full time into the metaverse. And then we all just, we make our full time incomes from the metaverse. We're able to be in it, live in it, like it is an integral part of our lives. How do we do that? How do we get there? What are some of the stepping stones? And what does that timeline and chronology and roadmap look like from your perspective?
Well, I think it's particularly hard for a lot of people to onboard into the existing crypto games. And I'm particularly passionate about those which are free to play. So like Sandbox, Decentraland, anyone can onboard into those. You don't have to have some certain amount of money, and you can earn NFTs in them. Like go to events in Decentraland, and you will earn NFTs and like start being a part of this ecosystem. And it doesn't cost anything to do so. I'm a little bit, like things that require you to have an NFT to onboard into them or to rent an NFT from somewhere else. Like I think there's a risk of those becoming unethical business models where wealthy people are extracting value. And there's certainly a place for renting NFTs. Don't get me wrong. Like there's a lot of reasons why it's helpful for gamers, and I think it's going to be an important part of it. It's just about getting it right and creating a smooth, progressive onboarding experience. So like I really like the Sandbox experience because they're building something where the player can onboard. They don't even necessarily have to have a wallet at first. And then once they have earned these NFTs, the player can redeem them and get a wallet at that time. And I think that's a really important UX pattern for helping make this more accessible to people. And I think that we're going to see AAA game studios doing that pattern in particular, where you're playing like a console game or something like that, or like a AAA PC game. And then from there, excuse me for my notification sounds.
Oh, good.
Being able to being able to increasingly join the ecosystem from there. I do think it's really important, and like I believe for a long time that it's really important that the wallets be interoperable and not siloed to a particular game. So I'm a big believer in game projects onboarding people into MetaMask. And it's not just because I'm part of the MetaMask team. I actually believed this for a long time before I joined the team. But the value proposition here is interoperability and universality across blockchains. And if wallets are siloed to every individual game, we end up making the worst possible user experience. Like one of the places that Web3 has a greatly better user experience is the portability of identity and the portability of assets and the universality across many projects. The idea that we need to try to mimic Web2 with usernames and passwords and create this future where people have like 60 wallets on their phone in all of their games, it will suck. Like, I don't want that. And like people forget where their assets are, or there's other patterns where they're like, oh, just import your same seed phrase into all these apps. And so like if one of those apps has a security compromise, then you're compromised across the board. Like that's a really bad pattern. And so we're going to do everything we can to promote interoperability and security and decentralization, and that's our focus.
I love that. I love that. So I know we've been going for a little while. I want to be very respectful of your time. So I just really want to. I have so many more questions, but
We can always
to
do another.
to but just kind of wrap up here. What question should I be asking you that I just wouldn't think to ask?
Yeah. So there's a lot we could talk about, but I'll just say that like we're seeing like use cases in the decentralized web evolve themselves, and so like we saw like DeFi summer, and there was this NFT and gaming boom like in the end of 2019 that I think a lot of people wasn't even on people's radar back then, but it did grow quite a bit back then. And I think that it's just I think it's important that these different diverse use cases grow into something that cross-pollinates and that creates this whole ecosystem. And maybe when people come from Web 2, like they worked in like maybe you worked on some Web 2 tech platform or something, the spontaneous playbook that people are trained in tells them like I have to own the entire experience, or I have to make my own walled garden. And I think that there's so much more value and opportunity for our ecosystem and for the individual projects themselves if we're spanning out across our use cases and across our individual projects, and we're building this as a truly community powered ecosystem.
I love it. I love it. I think so too, because the more that we're all working together and the more that we're working to grow the entire ecosystem, the better it's going to be for everybody. I mean, the the whole rising tide raises all ships thing, like it's a cliche, but I mean it really applies to this pretty nicely. Like when we get more when we have a better onboarding experience for people to get into crypto and get into crypto gaming, every project is going to benefit because then there are more people to participate in the whole ecosystem. Like when the games are better, it's going to bring more gamers, and that's going to then overflow into the DeFi side, and then it's all connected. It's some way. So yeah, I totally agree with you. And that's why I'm so grateful to be able to speak to people like you, because you're building it. I mean, you're in it, and then you take time to come and talk about it on the show. I mean, I'm just incredibly grateful. So thank you very, very much. I really
Amazing talking to
appreciate
you, Ben, and I love your show and love being in touch with you.
You're the man. And to everybody who is watching and listening, whether that's today, tomorrow, or a trillion years from now, thank you so much. Game on, and I'll see y'all in the metaverse. Take care.
Cheers.